Okay, we are now recording. I'm going to put us on mute on my phone so we don't disturb you.
Okay, and I'll just jump right in. So, hi, everybody. I'm Denise Ellsworth. I'm with the OSU Department of Entomology, the Bug Department, and OSU Extension, which is outreach education for our land-grant university. Really happy to be here tonight to talk about our Plant by Numbers project, protecting pollinators one garden at a time. So, a lot of practical advice for things you can do in your own backyard. But first, I really want to thank the club, Kent Audubon, for letting me connect remotely. Our son and daughter-in-law live in Durham. Our daughter-in-law is in the CRNA program, the a nurse doctorate program at Duke. And our son has to travel this week, and they have little Sam, who's just 2. So Grandma and Grandpa had to swoop in and help out. This is finals week too. So um, Scott and everyone at the club was great about letting me connect remotely. So I'm really appreciative of that. So let's spend some time talking about pollinators. That's really what my work is focused on. All kinds of native creatures. I worked particularly with wild bees, but of course we have butterflies and moths and flies and beetles, all kinds of insects that are pollinators. Our bird example, as you know, hummingbirds visiting flowers for nectar and transferring some of that pollen around. We are concerned about our pollinators, just like we are about lots of other kinds of insects, really across the globe. But if you think of your own experience out in the natural world, from the time you were a child till now, whether that's a long time or a short time, you've probably noticed some significant changes. There aren't as many fireflies in the summer. You don't have as many moths coming to your porch light like you used to see. We don't see the monarch butterfly displays that we used to see. So we're really concerned about biodiversity, about all living things on Earth, and in particular the insects, because they really are that foundation that so many other creatures depend on. If you are a fan of wild bees, you probably know about this bee. This is the rusty patch bumblebee. And it's this rusty patch here on the abdomen. That's one way that we can identify different species of bumblebee. This was the first bee that was added to the endangered species list in the continental US, and it really got a lot of people excited and worried about the fate of our bees, of our native pollinators. Bumblebees are big and cuddly and fuzzy. They're kind of the flying teddy bears. So they've been an ambassador to get people thinking and concerned and wondering, what can I do in my own backyard that could help these different pollinators? And so we developed, thanks to a USDA grant, this Plant by Numbers program. It was a 3-year grant, so the grant is officially over, but our materials are up online, and I wanted to share those with you tonight. There is a quick link. You have to put the HTTP in before the Go link. And before we end tonight, I'll put this in the chat box too. Or you can take a little screenshot of the QR code, and that'll get you to Plant by Numbers. So I want to share about our garden guides, some of our favorite plants, and some of the creatures that benefit from Plant by Numbers. And what really led us here is that many of us, probably if I did a show of hands in the room or in the virtual room, lots of you are planting native plants. Maybe you're an only native planter. You have lots and lots of native perennials and native trees and native shrubs, and that's really your thing. Other folks, maybe you do lots of herbs and vegetables and you have a few natives that you've sprinkled in, or in your pots on your deck, you've added a few native plants. And we found that more and more people were interested in native plants. They want to put these in their gardens, either in a small way or in a big way. But particularly new gardeners or people new to native plants really can be confused. How do I get started? How did these plants grow together? How can I tend them so it doesn't look like, kind of a weedy mess? I need to fit in my neighborhood to some degree. And how do I do that with native plants? And so we started looking around our OSU team to see how native plants are being used. And, if you're into native plants, over the last 10 or 20 years, we've really seen a huge surge in the use of native plants, in native plant nurseries, in places, near us, like the Wilderness Center or the metro parks that have native plant sales. So it's much easier to access those plants than it used to be. And so just looking across the country, this is the Farnsworth Museum here on the left, up in Rockport, Maine. And they have this whole entrance area filled with beautiful native plants. Here's a cityscape where the little tree islands are planted with these soft, we call these areas soft landings where creatures can kind of hide in there and overwinter and get some protection from heat. This is at Franklin Park Conservatory in Columbus, where, of course, they have lots of beautiful non-native plants, but also include native plants in their mixes and help people learn about those. Down bottom right is the city of Lexington and one of their plant by numbers. I'm going to talk about that in just a minute. They have an amazing plant by numbers project, and this is at a park where they've planted one of their designs. And then here in Ohio at the Cincinnati Zoo, which is a really shining star in the state, planting lots of native and non-native plants and helping people access these plants and this information. So we had a grant to develop these themes and associated garden guides. So I'm going to walk you through, fairly quickly in the 40 minutes or so we're gonna talk about this. All the different creatures that are focused in our themes, and then some of the plants that will bring those creatures in. But as I said, this wasn't we're kind of standing on the shoulders of other people, in this case, the city of Lexington, the Parks Department, that quite a few years ago put this Plant by Numbers project together there in Lexington with this idea of having just some simple designs to help people know how to put these plants together, a little bit of information about the plants, a couple choices, and some really basic maintenance and planting information, where to find the plants, how to get them in the ground, and how to take care of them. And we just loved how eye-appealing this was, and wanted to kind of springboard off of what they had done at the City of Lexington. And if you go to our website, you'll find that we've linked to this Plant by Numbers website in Lexington, and you'll see they really have dozens of different designs, some for the sidewalk, for shade, for full sun. They have ones for rain gardens and for pollinators, and just some really wonderful creative ideas. And the idea is really to bring vitality, to bring nature and creatures and plants together in our gardens again. Unfortunately, so many landscapes have a little patch of grass, maybe a tree, but not a lot of vitality. And it's the plants and the flowers that all these different creatures really need to thrive and create a really healthy ecosystem. Now, it's not that all these plants need to be native. Many of our non-native plants are excellent for birds and bees and butterflies, and even weeds. Up here is red clover. It's actually one of my favorite plants to include in my own garden because of the bumblebees, like this beautiful bumble here, that are attracted to different weeds. So, of course, we don't want invasive weeds. We don't want Canada thistle, something that's really difficult in our gardens. But many of our non-native plants and our native plants can live together really nicely in the garden and create this healthy ecosystem. What we know about bees, and we have about 450 or so species in Ohio. We don't know exactly how many, but people are counting right now, trying to do some surveys. But what we do know is that the more plant diversity you have in your own yard, the more bee diversity you're inviting in. And so this is just a little screenshot from iNaturalist. I know a lot of you probably use iNaturalist. This is a project called the Ohio Bee Atlas. So every observation or picture taken through iNaturalist that, excuse me, comes in for identification automatically goes into this Ohio Bee Atlas. And so we have hundreds of different bees that have been observed and uploaded here on iNaturalist. And what I want you to notice is how many different kinds of flowers are in these pictures, right? These bees are going to different colored flowers, different shapes and sizes, ones that bloom at different times of year and offer different rewards. And so by kind of mimicking that idea of bee diversity or plant diversity in our own gardens, we can invite in this wonderful bee diversity. So how many flowers does it take? And this is where I often start with folks. Excuse me. You don't need a whole acre or a pasture. You don't need an entire meadow to invite in these different creatures. Many times it's just one little plant. And this is a kind of ironweed that I grow in my own garden, and it has been featured in our Plant by Numbers project. This is actually called iron butterflies. So it's a cultivar of a native plant, but it's still really inviting to this bee that is a specialist bee. So what's a specialist bee? It's a bee that has to have a certain pollen to provision cells underground for its offspring. So this mom, she has white pollen pants on. We can see all that white pollen back here. She's been visiting these ironweed flowers, gathering up all that pollen, and then she takes that to a little underground chamber where she mixes it with some nectar, and then she packs it all in together, builds what we call bee bread in there, and then lays an egg and seals off that little nursery cell. And because she's a specialist, this is the only pollen that she'll collect for her offspring. So about a third of all of our bees in Ohio, so maybe 100 different species of bees are what we call specialists. So they have a really narrow range of plants that they'll visit to gather pollen. And so when we plant just one of these iron butterflies cultivars or a different ironweed, you can grow the 10 feet tall ironweed or one of the other species or cultivars. These specialist bees will find that plant. And what they're really doing is smelling out that flower smell, finding their way to that plant and gathering up that pollen for their offspring. So this is a really rich plant for that reason. It has one species that has to have pollen from that plant. But that's not the only benefit to planting something like ironweed. There are 22 different species of butterflies and moths that need ironweed for the caterpillars to mature. It's a host for the American painted lady butterfly, which is a beautiful cosmopolitan butterfly. It provides nectar and pollen for different kinds of bees and wasps and beetles. And it also provides nesting materials and seed for birds. So a really rich plant that has a lot of these kind of natural networks out there, but especially for the specialist bees, we consider this to be a really important plant. So the first theme we developed was a specialist bee theme for Plant by Numbers. So I'm going to walk through this one in a little more detail just to give you an idea of what Plant by Numbers is. For each of the guides, and these are all online, they're PDFs, you can download them, excuse me, or share them with friends, or you can print them out. If you're there in person at the park at Sippo Lake, you have some hard copies there. But basically, for each of the guides, we feature the theme. So in this case, the specialist bees, we talk a little bit about who they are and how they live. And then we worked with a garden designer, Deborah Kanapke, who's a lecturer and author out of the Columbus area, professional horticulturist. And she developed these little 6 by 10 garden designs for each of our themes. So we wanted something pretty small, not a real big investment space-wise, with maybe 6 to 8 to 10 plants, depending on the theme. Then we offer a first choice and a second choice for all of these plants for all the garden designs. And there's nothing magical about whether you pick, this perennial sunflower or this crimson-eyed marshmallow. You can kind of mix and match, but we give you just ideas for the design for folks who need a little help getting started. Those first and second options for each design. And you pull these plants together, and with the specialist bees, you'll be inviting dozens of different species of specialist bees to your garden. These are some really rich plants, especially the sunflowers, the goldenrod, the asters, really, really important for specialist bees. If you grow the crimson-eyed rosemallow, this native hibiscus, maybe you have a kind of a wet area, although they can tolerate areas that are just a little not really on the dry side, but not quite as wet as a wetland. They can grow in the garden. You may get this hibiscus turret bee coming to visit your garden. This is a special species. She has to have pollen from plants in the hibiscus family. And interestingly, she can use your Rose of Sharon. So we know that's a non-native plant, but this bee will sometimes be found in a Rose of Sharon. Smells enough like food for her. She sniffs that out through her antennae and gathers the pollen from that plant. Here's our friend, this Melissodes, this longhorn bee, getting that white pollen from the ironweed. And how we put this together is we worked with the lists available through the National Wildlife Federation and Doug Tallamy, some specialist bee experts like Jared Fowler and Sam Droege, who put, excuse me, who put these really great lists together online, and we link to these on our website, some of the best plants for specialist bees. So here we see sunflower, goldenrod, aster right there up at the top. We also use black-eyed Susans and wingstem, willows, and a few other woody plants as plants in the garden handouts. So here's that aster and an aster specialist bee. Here's goldenrod. Goldenrod has 42 different species of bee that have to have goldenrod pollen. So you don't have to grow the great big tall goldenrod that kind of takes over the meadow or the garden. You can grow a smaller goldenrod. We used fireworks often in our garden designs. Doesn't spread as wildly as some of the straight species. And I should have mentioned, let me go back here real quick. So what we did, depending on your interests as a native plant gardeners, in the first option, we included some cultivars. So in this example, Lemon Queen sunflower, it's a selection of this perennial sunflower. But not everybody wants to use cultivars, so our second choices are all what we call straight species. So those are the perennials that are going to come true to seed. They're not cultivars, and they're going to be a little more widely acceptable to lots of different pollinators. So we do give you that option there. We also think about seasonality. So we have bees that are out at different times of year or different critters depending on the theme. And so we want to think about how can we invite our interested creatures in at different times. Our grant allowed us to grow these native perennials and then share them with public spaces who could grow out these designs with signage to show people what they look like. And they actually planted some there at Sippo Lake. And so we could grow and share those perennials, but we really didn't have the funds to share woody plants. So what we did is in the garden designs, in the garden guides, we shared ideas for trees and shrubs or vines that are native that go along with that theme. And then some idea of where you can purchase native plants, how to find your local extension office, and more information about plant by numbers. So for specialist bees, we feature our shrub dogwoods, our willows and blueberries. Those are really rich for specialist bees. Willow in particular, I hope you have pussy willow in your garden. Lots of different specialist bees that come to willows and other bees as well besides the specialist. So my take home for the specialist bee theme is the importance of native plants. That a lot of pollinators will go to native and non-native plants, but we have some pollinators, these specialist bees, that have to go to our native plants. So really highlighting the importance of adding even just a few extra native plants into your garden. The next theme I want to talk about is our bumblebee theme, and maybe you've seen some big queen bumblebees out flying. We talk a little bit about the life cycle, how the queen overwinters and then comes and starts that whole life cycle. She's looking for pollen and nectar out early in the season, in your wildflowers, again, willows, sometimes maples, depending on the weather, maybe even your bulbs. So here, a bunch of queen bombus impatiens, our common eastern bumblebee, on crocuses, a good reason for all of us to plant more crocus. And then it's really her daughters, the workers, that are out foraging on these different plants. So we decided to go with some bumblebee favorites. Bumblebees are generalists. That means they'll go to lots of different kinds of flowers. They're not specialists like our longhorn bee was, but they have some favorite plants. So we tried to highlight their favorite plants, again, with some first and some second options there. And a lot of these plants are going to be great for other bees and other creatures in your garden. We have a little design, of course, the 6x10 design. And for bumblebees, we decided to go with some bunch grasses, and that's because oftentimes bumblebees will nest at the base of the old leaf blades there for your bunch grasses. So if you do grow those bunch grasses in your garden, you want to kind of leave those old leaves from last year if you'd like to see if bumblebees will nest beneath them. Bumblebees, because they're a social bee, they're out for a long season from, say, the end of March or April, depending on our weather, through November, depending on the species. And so we really want to bridge that season with trees and shrubs. So we offer some different suggestions. For example, redbuds, really great for bumblebees, but also for other creatures. This is a polyester bee that also happens to really like redbud. Not a specialist, but one that will be invited to come into your redbud. So my take home for this one is just the importance of adding those native trees and shrubs into the garden to really bridge that season. Our next theme, butterflies and moths. And of course, people love to see butterflies and moths coming to the garden. But our real interest was helping people understand the connection between caterpillars and birds, right? Because this is really the bird food. And by planting these plants, we're helping, we hope, to overcome some of the challenges that birds are facing with our adult breeding bird decline. One of the things we think that we don't have enough food out there for the birds to take back to feed to their young. So what does bird food look like? We often think of the seed, but it's really the insects, that protein source that's so important to get those chicks to adulthood. So for butterflies and moths, we feature, again, a nice suite of plants that provides the food for 330 different species of butterflies and moths. Not that all of those species are going to be in your garden, but we hope that some of the butterflies and moths will come lay eggs on your plants, on your goldenrod, on your sedge, or if we're lucky, on your milkweed. The caterpillars will develop there, and hopefully some birds will come and be able to feed on those caterpillars. We know because of Doug Tallamy and others' work that those keystone species are so important, those particularly woody species of trees and shrubs that are good food for lots of different kinds of butterflies and moths. And so oaks, willows, cherries, plums, and crab apples, particularly strong for butterflies and moths, as well as bees. And so we get kind of the double bang for the buck if we include oaks, willows, and other woody species into the garden. Another plant that I grow a lot of, this golden alexander, Zizia aurea. It's a host for swallowtail butterfly, the black swallowtail, but also is important for a specialist bee. This little bee here, this little Andrina, that's the only pollen that she can collect for her offspring. So really highlighting the importance of including these native plants. In this case, not just for the butterflies and moths, but for this little specialist bee. So my take home here is think about the practices you're using in the garden. Reduce or eliminate your pesticide use always on flowers. We never want to use any kind of chemical products on our flowers, any kind of pesticides, because those products can be taken up by bees or other pollinators, taken back and can harm the young. So thinking about, the pesticides that we're using, are we harming those caterpillars on the leaves? Are we harming the bees that we're trying to attract? So really taking an integrated pest management approach in our landscapes to use fewer chemicals and healthier inputs. Our next theme is hummers and singers. So this is a bird-focused theme where we wanted to bring in plants that are great for hummingbirds, of course, those nectar plants, but also plants that provide the seed and the insects that a lot of our birds need. These native perennials that are great for seeds, not just when they're fresh, but throughout the winter if you leave your seed heads up. We included some grass choices in this theme. And so let me tell you just a little story about our plant production. We used to have a facility at OSU that was a greenhouse where an amazing grower, Bob Philbrun, could grow up all these perennials and thanks to the grant and could provide these to over the years about 250 different public garden sites. Bob's position changed and he was called to Worcester instead of the greenhouse where he had been growing. And we found that out kind of at the last minute, last growing season. And so luckily we were able to partner with Prairie Nursery and their 32 plant songbird garden. And so we adapted our plant list and our design to focus on the plants that they include in this Prairie Nursery garden. And so you can go on to Prairie Nursery. You can buy one of these. You can't right now, actually, you have to wait till fall because they won't ship it now. But either this fall or next spring, you could order one of these collections and plan out this Hummers and Singers garden. My take home here, wild bergamot, one of the best plants for bumblebees. They love it so much that if you grow anything else and wild bergamot or really any of the monardas, the bumbles are going to go to the monarda. They're going to ignore everything else, the chocolate, the cream pie, they don't care. They're going to the monarda. It's their favorite on the smorgasbord. But hummingbirds love this as well. So some plants are just favorites, and you find those plants that the bees and the birds like, and you keep growing those in your garden. Just find out what works for you. So good garden bugs is the last theme that we developed. It's well, no, it was the second from last year. And it's really focusing on those predatory insects like wasps, spiders, true bugs, lacewings, those predatory insects that are coming to help manage some of the pest problems in your garden. So these predatory insects have some interesting challenges. They generally have short mouth parts. So you may not think about insects and their mouth parts, but compared to a honeybee with a pretty long tongue, or a bumblebee with an even longer tongue, these insects and spiders have very small, very short mouth parts. And so the flowers that we feature for inviting in these predators have to be short flowers, daisy-like flowers. Some of our goldenrods are mints, where they can access the nectar or pollen without having a really long mouth part. So here, let me introduce you or reintroduce you to the flower flies. They resemble bees. They mimic the coloration of bees to protect themselves from bird predation, but they have the large eyes of flies that meet in the middle, these little stubby antennae, and only two wings, which is hard to tell from either an image or on the fly. But they are visiting your garden, finding flowers to drink a little bit of nectar and maybe eat some pollen, but then they're looking for a little patch of aphids on your broccoli or on your viburnum where they lay their eggs. This is a flower fly larva, so a baby flower fly. The egg hatched out into this critter. And you can see that this baby flower fly is sucking the juices out of these aphids. Okay, so it's a natural method of kind of pest management in the garden. This larva will then pupate, just like a fly has the maggot stage and then the pupal stage, and then emerges as an adult. And as long as you have some nice shallow flowers, maybe some Queen Anne's lace or some parsley that's gone to flower, those flies can find nectar, they'll find mates, and then they'll keep looking for the aphids in your garden. Other plants in this theme have extrafloral nectaries. So a nectary is usually in the flower itself, but this is a nectary that is outside of the flower. So that's the extra part. Extradition when you're taking someone outside of the area. So this extrafloral nectary, in this case, this is on a cherry stalk. So this is the petiole for a cherry flower, or sorry, cherry leaf. And this is the petiole. And there's these little glands, and we can see here this drop of nectar. And this is an extrafloral nectary. So not only did we choose shallow flowers that these predators could access, we chose plants that have extrafloral nectaries so that even when this wild senna is done blooming, the little extrafloral nectaries that are on the leaves and near the buds can continue to produce nectar. So um, inviting these predators in. And so if you think about it, this is a great trade-off for the plant. I'll offer you a little bit of nectar, wasp or ant, and you come drink the nectar and protect me from caterpillars or from other insects that might be there. So the predator's getting a little drink of nectar and the plant's getting some protection. We also included milkweed, a really amazing source of nectar, maybe one of the richest sources of nectar out there, um, but also a source of prey. I mean, you don't like to think about that, but those aphids that you don't like in the garden, if you can tolerate them, they're going to invite in some predatory insects. So we see this little patch of aphids. We see this one here that looks kind of like a paper bag, right? A little blown up paper bag. This is an aphid that's been parasitized by a tiny little wasp. So this tiny little wasp lays an egg in the aphid, and this is called a parasitoid. The larva of the wasp grows up inside the aphid. The aphid, not feeling so good, starts to kind of blow up into this paper bag color and rounded shape, and then the adult wasp emerges. So if you can tolerate some aphids in your garden, that'll bring in, it's like a little trap to bring in some of those predatory insects. And again, we're really focusing here on those really simple, shallow flowers. So our Zizia, again, the Zizia aurea here, very shallow in the carrot family. Goldenrods with some very accessible flowers. Mountain mint, one of my favorite plants. Rattlesnake master with this mound of very shallow little flowers, easy for these predatory insects to access. Our last theme is shady spaces. So this one just came out about 2 weeks ago. So it's up there online. A lot of people said, I'd love to plant for pollinators, but I'm in total shade or I'm in partial shade and I just don't have any room to plant asters, to plant sunflowers. I don't have enough light. And so we focus then on some plants that are more flexible, that are still inviting to lots of different pollinators in those shady spaces. So again, some of our favorite creatures here on the front page of the garden guide. And then we feature, so this little Andrina, a little mining bee that loves this geranium, or our queen bumblebees that are usually out around the time that Virginia bluebells are blooming. So for this design, for this garden guide, because we know that your shade is different depending on how your yard is, right? You could have a very wet soil or kind of a more average to dry soil, and not all those plants are going to do well in either location. So we have a design for a moist to wet site or for a drier site on the other side of the page. Again, with those first and second plant options. And what I love about this theme is that even with those shady spaces, we're able to include some of the plants that are inviting other creatures in. Besides, we think of the asters and the bumblebees or the other wild bees that are invited into this plant, but also the specialist bees that need goldenrod, that need asters, that need sunflowers. And often, if we have enough light for these plants to grow on edges, we get more diversity of bees that are going to be able to find and finish their life cycle on those plants. So again, here's that QR code. If you missed that the first time, this will get you to our website with all of those garden guides. We have 6 now. As I said, they're accessible on there, easy to pull off and share, to give you some different plant ideas. And actually, some places have been great about incorporating these designs into their plant sales. Down at Chadwick Arboretum, their plant sale, it's on the Columbus campus, their plant sale's coming up in May, and they're offering the shady spaces, some of those plants as a kind of a kit in their plant sale so that people can get those plants growing in their shady spaces to invite some of those great bees and butterflies. And speaking of the Columbus campus, here is a little, really just a parking lot island that I was so tickled that some of the Chadwick Arboretum volunteers decided to plant in conjunction with a theater class that was doing an Earth Day presentation last year, or an Earth Day theater production, and they wanted to get their hands dirty. And so we got, this is actually a couple multiples of the specialist bee gardens with a few plants added in because they had a little bit larger space there. But you can just see how well those plants are doing. Lots of colorful blooms. We've got a little bit of signage there to tell people what's going on. And and otherwise what was kind of an eyesore, just a little mulched area, we've turned into a really vibrant, lovely space. So here's my contact information. I'm at ellsworth.2 at osu.edu or blab.osu.edu. I don't know if we have time for questions, but I really, again, thanks to the club for letting me present remotely. Thanks everybody for your interest, and hopefully you found one or two native plants anyway that you'd like to include in your own garden to help bring in these great pollinators and butterflies.
Everybody says thank you, Denise.
Oh, thank you. Thanks, everybody.
Yeah, I'm in this program. Like I'll put it on a newly created YouTube channel just for Camp Audubon and sending it out, either putting it on a website or sending it out via email, that if anybody else wants to rewatch it on that, you'll be able to see it on your, just on YouTube.
Yeah, see Cleveland or the Western Cuyahoga Audubon is doing that, and it's a really cool idea. So yeah.
And Denise was gracious enough to let us
Yeah,
actually record it.
Oh, I'm happy. Yeah, happy to do it. Thanks for spreading the word. So we think about 450 different species. We're not exactly sure, but there's some counts happening right now. But Karen Goodell is a professor down at OSU Newark, and she's in charge of some of these different surveys looking across the state. And when I spoke with her a couple weeks ago, she said, "Yeah, we think 450." One thing that's so amazing to me, they found some collections, some really old collections of just individual amateur entomologists, and they found some bees that were not on the list before. So they keep uncovering a few bees every year that they didn't know were in Ohio. So the list is growing. So they have not found the rusty patch in Ohio. It used to be a common bee in the state, but starting in 2017, there were a couple really concentrated surveys to try to find the rusty patch in Ohio, and they weren't able to find it. So there's still some hope that it might be found, but the last sighting was just an individual at a roadside planting up near the Toledo Zoo, and hasn't been seen really for about, I think, about a dozen years in Ohio.
If anybody at home would like to ask questions, just have them put it in the chat or unmute themselves and ask the question.
Oh, I see one on there. It says, Chris asked, are there any of the special species in this area that only like one or two of the plants on the list that would be helped by those plants? Um, and so let's see, only like one or two of the plants on the list. So I guess the crimson-eyed rose mallow would be one example that there's only one specialist bee that goes to that plant. And we actually link, if you go to the website, you can see the whole list of plants for specialist bees and kind of see what's already in your garden and maybe pick something that's not, that you're not growing. So you can try to invite some more of those specialist bees in. Yay.
that she's got about 95% of the species that have been mentioned that will be ready in about 2 weeks, she said.
Yeah, that's awesome. Megan and I have talked at meetings before, and she gets me really excited by all those plants that she's growing, and helping to spread that word how important these plants are for people think about milkweed and butterflies, but they don't think about specialist bees, or they've never heard of specialist bees, so they don't really have that connection for how important native plants can be. So I really appreciate Megan and other growers that are focusing on these plants and trying to get them in the ground.
Bee you shared on Members Night that had the purple colored pollen.
Oh, that one was the cotton candy. So that was the Spring Beauty mining bee. And so Spring Beauty is the only plant that mom will go to for pollen. And it's really a pink cotton candy color that she gets in those pollen pants. It's really, really sweet. So if you see a little bee on your um, Spring Beauty, that might be it.
Yeah, because that was probably the most beautiful pollen I've ever seen.
Yeah. Yeah, so it's a great question. So it's only that bee is only active as an adult for most specialist bees, only 4 to 6 weeks as an adult are they active flying. So they're working busily provisioning those cells, usually underground, with that pollen while the plant is blooming. Because once the plant's done, there's no more food for the babies, right? So they're flying for just a few weeks, and then the eggs are underground with that pollen ball, and all the adults die, the males and the females. And underground, then those eggs are developing, the larvae hatch, and they're feeding on that pollen ball all throughout the year. And then they emerge next year, amazingly, right, in sync with Spring Beauty or whatever that host plant is.
Did you see the one which bees like crimson rose mallow?
Oh, the question, I didn't see that. So that one is the hibiscus turret bee is the specialist bee that likes that plant. Now there'll be other bees that come to your hibiscus, but this is one bee that has to come to hibiscus. And you'll see it on there. It looks you'll on first glance you'll think, oh, that's a bumblebee, but it's not a bumblebee. It's a cousin, but it's not a bumble. It's not a bombus. Um, and so you'll have to kind of look close at that one to see that it's the specialist bee.
How can, um, these leaflets, you say you can get these all online, right?
The PDF is all there. You can't order printed copies, but you can have them, print them out or have them printed somewhere. Yeah, unfortunately, with printing costs, my gosh, they're costing like 75 cents a piece these days, unfortunately. But yeah, they're really beautiful. We have a publications team that really put a beautiful guide together. Yes.
Are those two good for all of the,
The QR code should take you to the website, and that has all 6 garden guides. Yep. Yep. And then there's
on flowers, which are bad, for insects and hummingbirds. When people put like Miracle Grow, the blue stuff, and then they pour it right over the plants and it gets in the flowers.
yeah, now that usually doesn't yeah, it doesn't really affect bees or other pollinators. Typically, the concern is if that product would coat the bee, but fertilizers aren't so much an issue. But if you do use insecticidal soap or a horticultural oil, that even though it's a safer pesticide, that can still harm a bee or another insect if it coats that insect. It kind of plugs up the spiracles or the air exchange pores in that insect.
So you're saying while you're bringing on the plant, if there's insects on it, you're covering up while they're there.
Not with the Miracle Grow's fine. It's really no. I meant with the insecticidal soap or a horticultural oil. But Miracle Grow's not really. The fertilizers aren't going to be a problem. In fact, they're good for the plant. The plants can take the The plants can take Miracle Grow up directly through their leaves, so it's actually a foliar feeding method. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Seeds, if anybody wants to order seeds online, there's Ohio Prairie. No, there's a one good website that you can get a ton of different seeds from.
Yeah, so and that we list that on our website as well, that those lists, but that's the OPN. They used to be Ohio Prairie Nursery, but now it's OPN Seeds, Ohio Prairie Nursery Seeds. And so they're focused on native Ohio perennials. Yeah.
And then, is there any other questions? I just want to know, you had the phone set on. What about snake root? Is snake root like equally as good as phone set or not?
So it's a great plant. I mean, it definitely has because those flowers tend to be shallow, it invites a lot of different pollinators in. I don't think it has any specialist bees that are associated with it. I'm pretty sure there aren't any, but it is a great plant. And when you have it in a site where it loves to reseed, you like to keep going with what's successful. Yeah, it's just a relay. We have a short, the go.osu.edu is our shortcut for OSU websites, and the U sites are another address for the same website. So, um, yeah, they should both work. Or just email me. I'll give you the link.
Do you hear the question, Denise?
Oh, black and white. Yeah, yeah. So different, yeah, different plants and the white, those short, accessible flowers, a little longer bloom, I think, and more sun loving than the cohosh.
There's a picture of phone set in here on one of these, but that would snake root look very similar, except it's different. But the black snake root, what's the other name for black snake root?
I think black cohosh.
No. You know what the flower looks like, Denise, on black snake root?
I think it's more of a spike, isn't it? A longer spike.
It's like grassy kind of looking. Well, I like it. That was a long summer flower, white flower. Yeah, I've got that at home. If anybody wants, like,
The question is, are ladybugs good or bad for your garden?
Well, they're predators, so they're a good way to invite aphid feeders, or they'll collect a lot of different small insects. But there are some ladybug beetles that are ladybird beetles that are not native, and they can actually eat the native ladybird beetles. So that's kind of the complication. The multicolored Asian lady beetle is a really voracious predator, and they will gather the eggs and the larvae of other lady beetles that are native. And so that's kind of a problem because they can diminish the numbers of our native lady beetles. So they're great. Lady beetles are great for the garden, but some of the species are bullies and invasive. Yeah, there's some nice guides online. Actually, the multicolored conveniently has an M on its back.
Multicolored Asian.
Hmm Yeah, I think Dr. Mary Gardner is in our department. She does a lot of work with ladybird beetles, and she has I think an ID guide online.
Yeah, thank you. Denise.
Uh, Thanks everybody. I really appreciate it. Thanks for tuning in.
Okay. Thanks. I'm gonna stop recording now. Thank you for joining me again, and thank you for, just so you guys know, Denise was gracious enough to donate her presentation fee back to the Audubon Society and present to us for free, which was very.
Thank you very much, yeah.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate your flexibility. You guys were great to work with me on this, so I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Denise.
Thanks. Bye all.